I was very curious what the walk-on music would be. It's totally underwhelming. I'm Yvonne, as she said. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at CPB. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Allison and Lori Kent for providing these beads. Totally appropriate. I'm going to start things off by sharing a few stats, and it's through these stats that we'll get into sort of the topic of the day and understanding how technology is impacting the work at our agency. And just looking at these, they're somewhat underwhelming, especially if you're a publisher, but they frame up the story pretty well. And so this is asking sort of the question of what did we publish outside of the creation of TV spots in terms of content in 2010. And so the big headline here is that probably under 1,000 pieces of unique content published. So then if you fast forward to 2014, you have over 10,000 pieces of unique content published. And again, this is all not counting TV. And so you also have a lot of variety there. You have Facebook posts, tweets, pins, Instagram video, and then long-form content. And so again, while in comparison to a major publisher, these might be considered low, for us, there's no doubt that it was a 900% increase in any organization that undergoes a 900% plus increase in anything is going to experience some level of stress and strain and the need for automation and technology advantages, and that's sort of what we embarked on to address this. And so what I want to do is share 3 stories about how we've taken on this change and how we've evolved our creative process to meet this demand. And typically in a creative agency, the way you evolve is there's this creative core in the middle. And in a lot of cases, you evolve by adding circles around the core and push and integrate that. And that's how we evolved when it came to digital, is by adding digital capabilities and integrating. But in this case, what you're talking about evolving is the creative process itself. There's no outer ring that you can add to it. You actually have to change what is in the middle. And that's much more challenging to do. And so for us, the sort of first tenet in this, or the first story, is an environment where we have more experiments executed more quickly. And so the way this all came about is I was sitting at my desk, and I got an email from a producer. It was like, hey, you should check out this bid that just came in from a production company. It's a bid for vitamin water because the team wants to create 30 animated GIFs for Instagram as part of this Uncapped tour that Vitamin Water sponsors. And so that's pretty normal to want to create content, to go to a production company and get a bid. I mean, that's automatic. That's how we do everything. But in looking at this bid, the price was $150,000 to create 30 animated GIFs. And so if you think about it, there's a little bit of logic there. The production company was like, well, this is CPB. There's going to be a lot of creative changes. I think maybe if you count up the hours and reviews, maybe $5K per GIF, let's make that a flat fee, and we'll see what happens. So I could see the logic, but at the same time, there's obviously no way that's possible at all. And this is one of the 10,000 pieces of content that we're charged with creating. So we called a timeout, went upstairs and sat down with the team and art directors, and very quickly Photoshop and After Effects came out. And after a while, you were creating animated GIFs in a couple of hours. But in creating those GIFs, a lot of things get surfaced that are systemic challenges to doing this in a recurring manner. And one of the first ones was that not everyone has the software to even create this sort of content. And more importantly, the teams don't necessarily all have the capture equipment to create this. And so right there, we made the decision to get camera, just basic stuff, basic tools, cameras, lenses, kits, green screens, lightbox, so that we could actually execute experiments more quickly and sort of stop relying on these automatic decisions of content needs to be created, go to content production company. And it turns out that the cost of purchasing this stuff is the equivalent of actually renting it for 2 days. So the ROI on this is sort of silly. So the second sort of area where we've had to evolve is under this umbrella of what we call make space for change. And when you're in a situation where you have basically all of this new content that needs to be created, but your teams are structured in the same way in 2014 as they are in 2010, that can create some big challenges. And so for us, what that meant is that we had a lot of situations where this type of content was the last to be approved, or it was relegated to the most junior team or even intern teams. And it's almost impossible to generate quality creative consistently when you're always dealing with that sort of thrashing. And so we made a decision. It's a little bit counterintuitive because as creative agencies, they're really the hallmark of excellence is integration. And so you would never think to solve a problem by creating sort of a silo. But in a way, that's exactly what we did, is we launched a team called the Post Office, which is an agency within the agency. And it's made up of creatives, creative directors, content producers, creative technologists, community managers, and they were the ones that took on that responsibility of creating those 10,000 pieces of content. And so anytime you're creating an agency within an agency, it's really important to get the inputs and outputs right. And so for us, it was really pretty basic. What you send in to the Post Office are all of the strategic tools that the brand teams and the social strategists are charged with creating. So the brand platform, what does the brand stand for? The social persona, how we talk, actions, what we talk about, engagement principle, when we talk, channel roles. All those things are developed in the same way they always have. But instead of being handed to those integrated brand teams, they're now handed to the Post Office. And the Post Office knows exactly how to churn out essentially their output, which is approved copy, video, photography, graphics, reviewed directly by the clients and posted immediately. So the advantages there are enormous for us. It's centralized, so you get a centralized set of people that are understanding the data, what works and what doesn't work, and they're able to experiment with volume that you maybe wouldn't have on a single brand, but you do have across a single set of brands within an office. And so the reality of it is that it lets us create content like this, or content like this, which is actually no different than the content we were creating before we launched the Post Office and handed people these tools. Except there's one key difference, and it's actually a huge difference, is that now we're able to track, and I'll show you the stats on this in a second, we're able to track things like average setup time, average shoot time, average cost of asset, average approval time, and average edit time. And those are the things that we're optimizing for, again, to reach this ability to do thousands and thousands of pieces of content. And so initially within our first year, we're probably right along these numbers. 15 minutes, 2 hours, 1 hour on approval time, 10-minute teardown, $1,800. When you think about where we were on this 5,000 per GIF, it's a significant improvement. Another improvement is that in a lot of cases, the labor that's going into creating these actual assets is already labor paid for by the client through a retainer. So the reality of it is we can make the creative asset without charging anything incremental. And for a creative agency to be able to produce new content without any incremental cost is a huge advantage to us. And so kind of to tie this all together, we started experimenting and we developed this tool that we call Hot or Not. And it's along this notion of putting up a big board. Is if you're evolving an agency, if you're evolving a group of thinkers, it's really important to make it clear where you're headed and make that loud and make that apparent to everyone. And so that's what we call a big board. It's like the goalpost. Kick it through those two goals. And so Hot or Not is a tool that we developed off of a listening tool called Crimson Hexagon. That's the tool that our community managers and analytics people use to develop reports and manage communities, and has an API. And so we just started tinkering and experimenting, and we created this interface that was sort of built off of Google Trends. But basically, each one of those tiles is a brand. And the one on the upper left is CPB. And so Hot or Not against Crimson Hexagon is just scraping every mention and tracking each point in something we call a buzz point. So if I tweet about CPB right now, Hot or Not's going to detect 1 point. If BuzzFeed tweets about CPB, Hot or Not is also just going to detect 1 point. So we're the same, but the thinking is that BuzzFeed is going to generate so many additional mentions that it's going to sort of proportionally weight itself out. And so what happens is anytime one of our brands hits a statistically significant level of buzz points, i.e. something has happened that is important, the tile turns from gray to red. This isn't real time, this is just a graphic. And so these were put in all of our lobbies. And the combination of having these new content creation tools with this scoreboard related to, hey, this is how we achieve the agency mission to create the most talked about, written about work in the world, and this is what it looks like when it happens, has had two sort of, you could say, unintended or intended effects. The first one is that there is this sense of wanting to make this tile red and knowing that that's what we're here to do. And so I think it was late last year, there was one of our clients is Fruit of the Loom. Barbara Broxer announced that she wouldn't be running for a second term. And so the team quickly mobilized and posted this. This in its own right is not that remarkable, and real-time posting is something that is pretty well established. What was remarkable for us was more the internal story of how our culture was changing. And that is that instead of promoting good work in the way we normally would with an email going around talking about either mentions, earned media impressions, or a citing in Creativity magazine, what was sent around was just this, which is basically a picture of our lobby in Boulder of the Hot or Not board, and all the tiles are gray except the one, which is Fruit of the Loom, and that was sort of the sign of, hey, we've achieved our mission. The more interesting way that this data visualization tool has impacted things is actually not in reflecting work done, but actually in creating insights on opportunities for work that can be done. The reality of it is our work is primarily media driven, and so it's easy to light up that board. What's more interesting is when the board lights up and we haven't done anything, and so you ask the question of what's happening, and that's a data insight that we can seize upon. And so I think this was in December of last year, there were 3 or 4 days where the Best Buy tile kept lighting up. And we're looking into what it was and discovered that basically Best Buy was not the central character, but certainly part of the plot of a massively popular podcast called Serial. I'm sure many of you tuned into Serial. Fastest podcast to reach 5 million downloads, and it's about a murder case from the 90s that was in essence rehashed. And there's a Best Buy in Maryland that actually plays a role in the plot. And in fact, there's a mysterious payphone within that Best Buy parking lot that's part of the story. So that Best Buy actually started getting visits from fans of the show. It became a tourist attraction. People would go in there and they would want the store manager to give them a tour of the Best Buy in the parking lot. The store manager had no idea who these people were. And so that was an example of it lighting up and us seeing an insight. We turned around and shot this out, I think like the day before the final podcast came out. And so again, nothing necessarily noteworthy as it relates to something that is a real-time post, but certainly something very noteworthy as it relates to how technology and the data insights that it's illustrating help us power our creativity. 2 days after this tweet came out, Fast Company posted an article with the 15 worst tweets of 2015, and this one was actually on there. And so that's not anything to be proud of, but it is sort of for us an illustration that there's an enormous creative opportunity within these insights, and that there is, like everything else, there's going to be some tension, and if we can expose that tension correctly, we're probably doing our job. And so, lastly, to end on, we ended up taking this element of Hot or Not and actually reskinning it and launching it on our website. So if you go to hoopla.cpbgroup.com, you'll see this same Hot or Not backend interface actually reskinned to be a public-facing interface that we call the Hoopla Countdown. The name Hoopla is part of CPB's DNA based on a book that our creative directors wrote many years ago, paying homage to our philosophy and P.T. Barnum's philosophy, the founder of the greatest show on earth. So what this is saying, hey, every 24 hours we're counting down and we're tracking, and our job is to in essence make hoopla, or more importantly, when a brand makes hoopla, our job is to tune in and find out exactly what's happening, because that one data insight could be what drives our next round of creativity. Thank you.
So we have a couple of minutes for questions, if anybody has any. We have a couple of mic runners. Well, I have one. How do you, what is the sense, do you create a sense of competition within the agency with something like Hoopla, and how do you manage that so that's healthy competition?
I think if the competition gets created, it's obviously healthy because we're all within the same agency. But I think the intent is more creating awareness and something that at all times is sort of forcing you to look up and ask a question based on something that you're seeing that you initially don't understand, but you know is relevant.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think we're one of there.
Yeah, what social listening tools do you use to capture some of this information?
So the Hot or Not and Hoopla Countdown is built on top of Crimson Hexagon and their API. The suite of tools that we use includes many more than that, including Unmetric, Crimson, all of the platform listening tools, Google Analytics, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but I know you're around, so you can stick around.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I heard a